Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using code NEST. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Hello and welcome to another session of Behind Enemy Lines, where we do a collaboration with another man like myself or woman like myself that is covering the team in the way that we do, looking to get that insider background look. Nobody sees it like they do on that side of it. I'm very happy to welcome in James from Mr. BucsNation, but also fellow roundtable member of the crew, part of the crew. Flash your set, James. Flash your set. Come on. How's the day going? How you feeling, my man?
Good, all things considered, man. Firstly, thank you for having me on. Really excited to talk about the Week 5 matchup here, right? So, very excited to dive into it, Brandon. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. I love doing this type of stuff, and like I said, you guys, nobody's got an insight like you guys do in covering your team. I can attest to that. And first thing we do off the rip here, by the way, for folks that are kind enough to be guests in here, is I've got a link down in the description section directly to Mr. BucsNation. That is his channel here on YouTube. So he's been kind enough to take time away here to chop it up with us. Let's be kind enough to show him some love back the other way. Please do sub on up to him. You can just click that link, sub on up. It's free to you, and show some kindness his way for stopping on in here as he is. Well, let's kick this off to a place that I know is a little bit right now open-ended, because we're doing the show where we are at this point of the day, and I know the final injury reports and MRIs. There's the whole MRI question with your coach this last week, and I don't even know. I can't remember. I don't know. It was 7, 10, 12. Everybody, I don't know.
It's a lot.
So it's a lot. You know, as a fan, you're always a little sensitive to the injury situation of the opponent coming in, just no matter what. It does feel, though, on the outside looking in on this one, that I always like to use the term a bridge too far, that you get to a point of a bridge too far in the injury standpoint, it ends up being just a little too much. Can you give us a kind of update on where that is much maybe where your feeling is on this? I know on some of this stuff you're not going to be able to say for sure, but maybe where your feeling's drifting towards.
Well, so there was a lot already, going into this game for the Bucs in terms of injury stuff, right, Brandon? So like Mike Evans, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Thankfully, it wasn't significant enough to where he had to be placed on the injured reserve. Don't necessarily know if he's in play for week number 5, but it's certainly, let's say an outside chance, but he's still dealing with an injury, right? That's the Bucs' #1 wide receiver there. Okay, not good. Coming out of the game, week 4 versus the Philadelphia Eagles for the Bucs, Bucky Irving sustained an injury and may be questionable going forward. Greg Gaines sustained an injury, may be questionable going forward. Hassan Reddick sustained an injury. Jamel Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Christian Izien had been dealing with an injury. So all across the board, the Bucs have injuries. Okay, Brandon, it's a long list. Let's just break this down, right? So Bucky Irving has an injury going into week 5 versus Seattle. Mike Evans probably going to be out. Your 4th wide receiver, Jalen McMillan, who you very well may be familiar with, he's on the IR still with a neck injury. So he is not available for this upcoming game either. Now, Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin came back. That's awesome. However, backup blocking tight end Keith on the IR, broke his leg. Starting right guard Cody Mock on the IR. I think he tore his ACL or something along those lines. Starting right tackle Luke Gedeke, who they just gave a $22+ million per year deal to, he's still on the IR dealing with a foot injury. He is still going to miss the next 2 games, including this one against Seattle, I believe. On the defensive side of things, starting defensive end Kalijah Kancey on the IR, tore his pec. Not great. 4th round draft pick of this most recent NFL draft, David Walker, tore his ACL in training camp. He's out for the year. And then, as I said, you have some other starter and backup guys that are questionable. Hassan Reddick, he had some type of neck stinger injury, I believe, in the game against the Eagles. Jamel Dean's banged up. Benjamin Morrison's banged up. Christian Izien, backup versatile defensive back, is banged up as well. So, Brandon, it is a very injured group here for Tampa Bay, to say the absolute least.
Does it feel like it's at a place of, this is the thing with your Tampa Bay team, still 3-1, have overcome what injuries you've dealt with so far this year. Very talented, and on top of being a talented team, a deep team. coming into this season? Maybe the type of team that can overcome these kind of injuries and still be such a major challenge for a particular team in the NFC. Do you see them as at that point, or is it, man, we are on shaky ground, barely holding on for dear life walking into this game as much because of the injury front?
Yes and no. Obviously, throughout this season, we've seen them overcome significant injuries, specifically Brandon on the offensive line, with Cody Mock being hurt, with Luke Gedeke being hurt, with Tristan Wirfs missing the first 3 games of the year, and Chris Godwin missing the first 3 games of the year as well with injuries. The Bucs have been able to overcome those circumstances. Against the Philadelphia Eagles, that's where you started to see, like, if they did have a couple of these guys back and healthy, you may have been looking at a different game there, right? In that situation. Now they still fought back, and it was a closer game in the end, but obviously it's going to get more dire as the injuries pile up. Right. And there's only so much that you can have that conversation, right? Of like, well, hey, next man up, fight through the injuries, next man up, fight through the injuries. Eventually it gets to a point where it's like, what is happening here? Like this is just insanity. And they're starting to get to that point. Now, if it, comes out that like, hey, everybody who had, a bit of a nagging injury against the Eagles, they're probably going to be able to be available and play, well, then you don't feel as bad. If majority of those players, like a Hassan Reddick, like Jamel Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Bucky Irving, if like majority of those guys aren't available, yeah, you really are getting into that territory of like, you got to give them a break here. This is just too much to overcome, so to speak.
Yeah, it does feel like that close, but it's also no shade to the organization, because I think any team that would be having any injuries mounted kind of speaks to the depth that you built, that you're 3-1 despite that. Also might get you starry-eyed for the future. I know there's some guys out for the year, but as some of the injuries round back into shape and you get on the right side of it, that you can maybe be at your strongest down the stretch on this first, maybe a little bit of where you stand right now. When getting to, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's like you said, like that aspect of it, for the later part of the season, it is something where you're like, oh, when everybody gets back, that's going to be great. But, like you said, like for the early portion of the season here, it is a very rough set of circumstances, right? And what I think about, and what you kind of alluded to, where it's like, where does that worry begin to creep in, is like, hey, if the Bucs, towards mid-season find themselves with more losses than wins, right? It's like, okay, well, we're getting everybody back. It's like, okay, well, is it too little too late now, type of thing, So that's an interesting conversation in there as well.
Yeah, as well it could be too, on if you do manage to carve the couple wins out as we get close to the deadline, but then you're still injured, how aggressive are you, or are you not with, that, how confident do you be in those guys coming back with this injection on the front end, and that combination is enough to get us to that best point. It'll be an interesting conundrum for the team a little bit when they get there, where they could be at on that, kind of more middle of the road, or having gotten to 5-6 wins there by the deadline and being in a position, maybe make some moves, go out there and get like a Trey Hendrickson on your defense on the edge. And wouldn't be the worst of things. I know it costed a little bit, but he's a rental player, not cost as much mid-season.
I would weep if they got Trey Hendrickson, Brandon. That would be amazing. I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, golly.
Well, and I mean, it's just, I watch the defense right now, and, I look at some of the advanced statistics that I was kind of playing with on the NFL site in regards to your Bucs. I know I said I was going to start on the offense, but just because, kind of mentioned that, it's just on a lot of stack in the box, pretty high top 10 blitz rate right now for the defense and what they're running. It sort of screams a little bit to me of, we can't really trust our front 4 guys. We don't have quite the dogs up front to get this done. And so we're manufacturing it to get it done, which you got a smart defensive head coach who can get that done. That's not out of pocket on him, but it is not the ideal maybe for where they'd like to be. Oh,
yeah. Sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty here. Yeah, regarding the defensive side of things, Brandon, it is a situation where it's been a couple year-long situation where it's like, yeah, they blitz like nobody's business, right? Todd Bowles blitzes just about as much as anyone in the NFL, or more than anyone in the NFL. And to that point, it's because they can't get pressure with 4, right? And it's been something that we've heard Coach Bowles talk about the past couple of off seasons, where they've been wanting to get better with rushing with 4, year after year after year, and time again. It's one of the big reasons why they brought in a guy like Hassan Reddick, and it's still just not formulating yet for them, right? They're still having to rely a ton on the blitz. Sometimes it does work, like against the New York Jets. Sometimes it doesn't work, like whenever they went up against the Philadelphia Eagles and some of those other teams that have quarterbacks that have more of, mobility in the pocket and things along those lines, right? So it's definitely a give and take. And it's still been such a big issue for this team even this year in terms of getting pressure with 4, getting after the quarterback with 4, not having to rely on the blitz because, as you blitz so much. Well, it's pretty, easy way to counter that. You're getting the ball out quick. It's exposing your secondary and all these different types of things, right? So while the Bucs do blitz a lot and they've had scattered success with it, they still do want that desire to get after with 4. It's just been something that's certainly been eluding them.
It's one of my major keys based on a little bit of how you talk about this, where with Sam Darnold, I think a lot of what he's done on the good side of his development as we've gone through his career here is his ability to be very quick and process very fast post snap and getting the ball out to this spot and it's a go. And that really does take the fangs out of a blitzing defense when you want to lean into that. And it's a big key on what I'm going to watch for in this particular game is if the Bucs try to still lean into that. And if they do, I think it's going to be a bit of a long day at the office for them on that because he's not a stand-in patter. He's not going to sit back there and give that time to get. He's going to tend to see it coming and tend to try to get the ball out of his hands quick to give you an answer on it. It's where he's been good so far for us, at least. That's one of the chess matches I'm going to be watching in this game.
Yeah, man, Sam Darnold, what a I feel like an underrated signing for Seattle, right? Because I feel like a lot of people thought when Darnold left the Vikings, a career revival, right? What a great, and I can't wait to dive into it. But these two teams have like so much great stories, like in their organizations right now, with like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield both being 2018, or both being in the same draft class, I should say. Baker being that number 1 pick, Sam being that number 3 pick, and then both just having career revivals, right? Former teammates on the Carolina Panthers. Sam goes and revives his career in Minnesota. Now he's like a full-fledged starter in Seattle. Baker, goes and revives his career a little bit with the Rams, but then has that full revival with the Bucs as a full-time starter here now. And I agree with you, man. Like the Sam Darnold that we saw, it's a meme, right? But when he was seeing ghosts with the Jets, right? That's not the same Sam Darnold now. I've been very impressed with how Sam has looked in Seattle, just in terms of taking care of the football and doing just really good work for Seattle, right? It's been very impressive in my opinion. So yeah, this isn't the same type of Darnold where you're just going to, hey, blitz him, he's going to get rattled and make some mistakes. Like, no, you've got to play sound football. And you can't get too greedy in terms of getting after him because, like you said, this is a quarterback who's much more poised in the pocket now, has seen enough to where in his NFL career to where he can kind of get after you and attack you on the blitz if you are not careful. So yeah, I agree 100% where it's, the Bucs cannot fully rely on the blitz in this game. Like they did against, let's say, the Jets, right? Because you're just going to have a situation where it's going to be short passes. And like you said, it might be a very long day. Right. So I'm going to be very curious to see what that plan of attack is for Darnold in terms of getting after him. And then in terms of just kind of trying to slow down this Seahawks offense.
Yeah. And I think that Tampa Bay runs enough creative stuff. It ain't going to be easy. It's just and there's stuff that there's still limitations in Sam's game here and there that you can kind of find. He's playing at as high levels I think we've seen him ever play, but that spot of him, back foot, here's the blitz. McDonald lamented all through camp that he can't blitz the guy because he gets the ball out of his hands. And we're at 2.72 seconds on average time to throw right now, which is on the lower side of it. And that's, if you're a blitzing team, that's the tough part. If you have a quarterback that's the mobile one can be a problem because he can run out of the blitz, but you also like the mobile one because they tend to be the 3-second guys. They've been, those 3-second time to throw dudes. And so you have that time for the blitz to get there. He's going to try to hold the ball a little longer and give you that shot. Versus this way where it's like, Jim will probably have an answer, but it's going to be the fun part of this game and how Tampa Bay maybe chess matches that and dials a little bit of their blitzing back perhaps and says, okay, we'll drop guys in coverage and see if he can read it through that or how he'll play it there. What type of loss is Kancey, by the way? Because I've tracked him a little bit as a player, but he was a guy I liked a lot coming out. I know there's always this with that size and quickness and explosiveness. It all goes to Darnold, and it's such an unfair comparison. We had our own Byron Murphy give that comparison, but I did like him as kind of a lesser version of a Darnold because that is a once in a generation defensive player that we saw come through. How has been his progress, say, for the Pack?
Yeah, so obviously it's going to be something that's going to wipe him out for the season. I think, like whenever you tore your pec, that's not a great situation. Now in terms of how he's been as a player, Brandon, it's an interesting conversation. I would say that he's certainly been a better pass rusher than a run stopper for the Bucs. Whereas you get a former player that you might be familiar with, former LA Ram and Greg Gaines. He's a guy who's definitely, I would say, a better run blocker or run stuffer than a pass rusher in regards to that. So the Bucs did lose some pass rushing juice. They do have former 5th-round draft pick Elijah Roberts, who's going to be getting some more snaps, and a player that they signed off of the Cardinals practice squad in Elijah Simmons, who is a big body defensive lineman who made a play or two last week against the Eagles as well. So it is certainly a loss to the pass rush, something that, again, we talked about, where it's like, with a loss to the pass rush like that, how are you going to rebound from that, right? And they are looking to guys like Greg Gaines, like Elijah Roberts in that mix to kind of get more opportunities to get after that quarterback. I think me and you have both talked about this, though, or have noticed it. The Bucs, like, their main strength defensively is still that run defense. They are still able to really stop up the run and tend to make teams a little bit one-dimensional in terms of, hey, you're going to have to pass on us. And that is going to have to be how you beat us in these types of situations. And I could very well see that being a very similar scenario in this upcoming game against Seattle, just because, again, you do lose some of that pass rushing juice with Kancey, but with more consistency from guys like Gaines and possibly even some other players as well, like Elijah Simmons, you do gain more in that run defense, adding to what was already there with guys like Vita Vea and stuff like that.
So interesting in that Gaines's history has been typically one where he plays one tech nose tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And you have already as Vita as your one tech nose tackle. So are you just essentially throwing Greg out there as the 3 tech, but sort of just getting big beefy up in the front side of things is kind of the point there?
It's a little bit of that. You did also it talked to Bull's creativity. So we do see some situations where Vita Vea is popping out to defensive end and Gaines is that nose tackle, right? And that's just a wild looking situation.
Is he effective, Vita, off the edge when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird look, right? Like watching Vita Vea on a defense, like in a 3-4 defensive end type of role. But I've seen it work. We have seen success with it. Vita Vea did have 2 sacks this past week at the nose tackle spot in that one technique, like you said. So you might want to keep him there, possibly. But to speak to the creativity of Coach Bowles, you do see more of Gaines rotating at D end and at nose tackle just from sheer necessity at this point. You do also see Elijah Roberts in there as the defensive end, and Logan Hall is in that mix as well. Former 2nd-round pick out of Houston. He is on the last year of his deal. He is also that other defensive end that gets opportunities there. Is one of the starters here on this Buccaneers defense. So it does vary. Typically, you do see Vita as that nose tackle. Sometimes Greg Gaines will come in to give Vita Vea a little bit of a break at nose tackles. Sometimes you see him at defensive end, just to like you said, just have a really big lineup in terms of the defensive line spot on there, just to get some big bodies down there to help out. It does vary depending on the drive, depending on the different types of matchups they want to look at and things like that.
Yeah, because if I walk down and I see 2 big nose tackles, and look, Villa can move really well for a guy his size, but he is, I'm walking up, and that's where I think we come back to, again, that blitz, stacked boxes, what we do. We've tried to run headlong into a wall through the first few weeks because last year we had an air raid guy in Grubb, offensive coordinator, pass happy as hell. Coach got frustrated because he wouldn't go back to run the ball. So this year it's kind of like the OC you brought in, you're like, you will run the ball, you better. And so he's almost kind of overcorrecting a little bit where you're almost running it sometimes 70% of the time, it seems like. And you're up in some of these games and you're in a position to do so, but you're sometimes running a little conservative. I just have to wonder if from stack boxes to blitzes to if you're going to rock 2 kind of nose tackles and once down in there, if there should be some pre-snap indicators off the offense on the Seahawks side of, hey, let's come after this Bucs secondary that's also a little beat up. Let's isolate a Levante Davids, maybe a little bit older with an Elijah Arroyo, and see if he can run step for step of him still at this point in time in his career. Would you, if you were Seattle, would you take this kind of approach?
I definitely think that that would be the kind of approach, Brandon. One thing that I think has been detrimental to the Bucs defense throughout this first month of the season has been their struggles covering the middle of the field. You did mention Lavonte David. It's been rough for him this year. He's definitely been showing his age. He's 34, 35 years old. Their second linebacker, Servassier Dennis, while he is looking good in run defense, in my opinion, is absolutely a liability in pass coverage. I mean, I just think that there's no question about it. There's been multiple times where we've seen tight ends, but more specifically running backs, Brandon, get a lot of receiving opportunities in the middle of the field, really be able to get some big yardage plays for their offenses when they're going up against that middle of the field. So, I mean, I know that you've got a lot of solid running backs in Kenneth Walker III, Zach Charbonnet. Those are two specific guys where, hey, if they have some dump off or check down options over the middle of the field, they could have some big opportunities there, right? And then also you take a look at those tight ends, and I mention it every week, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo. I mention every team's tight ends because, man, as long as they're getting something over the middle of the field, that's kind of been the best place to take to the point of attack of this Bucs defense is, hey, these linebackers aren't tackling well right now. They're not covering well right now. That's kind of been the sweet spot to attack this Bucs defense has been over the middle of that field.
And it's no shame to Lavonte David, who might very well end up having a Hall of Fame career, as we saw the same thing happen to our Bobby Wagner at times. And these guys can still be great run defenders. So instinctual, a step ahead with the brains that they bring to the position and wisdom that they have. Did feel like there was like one throw in that early Eagles game watching the 22 last night where, he just didn't get to the depth on his drop. And Eagles hit him right up over the top in the middle of the field, to your point, with depth. And it felt like one of those plays that you go, boy, a younger Lavonte probably climbs a couple extra yards and gets back there to depth on that play.
Yeah, it's just something, father time, undefeated, as it happens. And the Bucs have, ever since they had gotten rid of Devin White, they've been really using Band-Aids to kind of cover up that second linebacker spot with late end draft picks and stuff like that. And they're doing it again this year. I feel like the situation wouldn't be as bad if they did have more of a reliable second option. But unfortunately, they just don't have that piece right now. They don't have that consistent answer at the second inside linebacker spot. Like you said, be it just in terms of pure athleticism, like you said, to kind of rise up in terms of coverage and things along those lines, they've been struggling. And then in the second linebacker spot with Servassier Dennis, that's been more of mental miscues. That has been more of maybe overcommitting on assignments, playing over aggressively, things like that. Those have been some of the issues in Dennis's game, at least in my opinion, throughout the start of this season for him.
That at least makes it more sense from their standpoint of tactically what they thought. Whereas Lavonte, they knew what they were going to have there in a little bit of back, but then they'd have in Servassier, the guy that could be athletically his sort of secret service guy for coverage, maybe. But he just hasn't been able to mentally bring the P's and Q's together on that. Is that kind of the outlook of what the plan was in theory?
Yeah, I think it was that. I also think that it was part of, hey, this guy looked good for us in rotation last year as the third linebacker, but he went down with a shoulder injury. Let's see what he can do as a full-time starter. And they've had this scenario multiple years in a row now where they have a guy in, first it was KJ Britt, now it's Servassier Dennis. Hey, in limited opportunities, he's in the right spot. He's making the right plays. He's doing good work. Yeah, he deserves a chance to be a starter because our current number 2 linebacker isn't doing good. For KJ Britt, it was taking over for Devin White. For Servassier Dennis, it was taking over for KJ Britt. And then you find this scenario where when they get more snaps under their belt, when they have to play longer extended periods of games, they're starting to get exposed, specifically in pass coverage. That's been the biggest thing. It's been, blown coverages. It's been blown assignments. It's been, chasing down, running backs when you're like 10 yards away and the running back's got the ball and is just going down the field. And the nearest defender is the guy who should be covering him in your second linebacker in Dennis. And, he's 8 yards away trying to chase him down. That's kind of where these issues are coming from. The athleticism is not really a question with Dennis. It's more so the mental game right now at this point.
Makes sense. And it gets just exacerbated then for what Levante might have as far as those deficiencies if he's not on that, and what you can maybe go after a little bit. We got to talk about Devin White, who was a real fun, one of my just favorite players. And I'm watching him play going into the Super Bowl run and knowing where you took him and what he bring to the table, size, speed, just kind of a vicious nature to him and early on. From the outside looking in, it looked like he just became unmotivated and a little chunky. But do you have the same outlook of that this guy had all-time type talent? I mean, Derek Brooks is one of the few will linebackers that's ever gotten into the Hall of Fame. And to me, this guy had more talent than Derek Brooks did as far as pure, and when you combination the size and the length that he brought to play too. But did I just get too caught up in him, or is that an accurate outlook of it?
I mean, you look back at what he did before his final year in Tampa Bay, and he had all the makings of a guy that should still be here, right? Like if everything did go well, Brandon, in terms of it's not even off the field issues. Like you said, it was just more of a motivational issue, I guess, in Tampa Bay and contractual issues and stuff like that. He would still be here in Tampa Bay being a high quality starter, right? But for whatever reason it may have been, just that drive and that relationship just began to deteriorated quickly in Tampa, where his play began to fall off. The coaching staff in the front office certainly fell out of favor with him, and it just resulted in a mutually agreeable split. Right now, he bounced around for a little bit. He found a home with the Raiders, with former Buccaneers front office staff member John Spytek. He's actually playing pretty well over there, and it is just a big what if for them, right? Because if Devin White was here and he was playing to what everybody thought his expectations were to be, which was like, hey, a high quality starting caliber linebacker in this league, you probably wouldn't have the same issues over the middle of the defense on this team right now, right? Certainly not. So it is disappointing how that situation came up. One of the bigger what ifs in recent Buccaneers memory, in my opinion.
Well, we played you guys 2 years ago in Tampa Bay, and it was a defense that was not the most talented at that point as you guys stood, but it really was a day that to me, a Vita Vea, and especially Devin White and what he did in the running game, that was Kenneth Walker was rolling into that game, and you guys put the brakes on us in that one, and it really changed the trajectory of the rest of our year. But it was a game where Devin was just absolutely controlling the action, and the physicality, his ability to fill the holes, to make the tackles with the offensive lineman hanging off of him from the side. Always just loved the talented kid, and that Super Bowl run of play that he had too down the stretch in the playoffs. I thought he was so very good down that line too. But it has, when you look at Servassier Dennis out there now instead, where you are kind of plan B, it feels like a little bit. First, that he was still a very young player. When he was one of those kids that came out like at 21 years old. So, he was going to be a guy that you probably were counting on to be around in his shape at this time. Secondary wise, when it comes to this one, Zion McCollum's has rounded into a really great cover corner. He made some nice plays, I thought, in this last game against the Eagles when they did go. It seems like they were kind of targeting other areas when the Eagles were trying to attack like the middle of the field. I know you don't know what's going to happen with Benjamin Morrison, but it does sound like hamstring, and then he's in for Jamel Dean. Are you guys down to then the fourth outside cornerback in this game?
So depending on the circumstances, right? If Dean and Morrison could not go, you would be having very likely Zion McCollum as your outside cornerback one, which, like what you said, he's done a very good job this year. Got a big contract for a reason, making over $16 million per year. Now going forward for a reason, he's been a really solid starting cornerback in this league. And he's getting paid like it now. Typically the starting nickelback for the Bucs is recent third-round draft pick out of Kansas State, Jacob Parrish. Now Parrish has been doing an incredible job this year, just in terms of doing a lot of the things that you want to see just any cornerback do in terms of coverage ability, even turning into the occasional blitzer. Parrish has been able to do all that to a good amount of success. Now, a big thing for Parrish is that he has inside and outside cornerback versatility. I could very well see a scenario where Parrish does move out to outside cornerback, and you do see a scenario where Parrish and McCollum are your two starting outside cornerbacks. You do also have a couple of other backup guys. Josh Hayes is there, although he is primarily a special teams player. You do also have former New York Jet Bryce Hall, who is on the Bucs practice squad. He has some starting experience in the league and could be another option for them. But I do believe that the first option would very likely be Jacob Parrish probably at outside cornerback, and then the Buccaneers may do a little bit of gymnastics in terms of their safety room. People, would remember that Tyke Smith was a starting nickel back for the Bucs last year. Antoine Winfield Jr. started at nickel back for the Bucs whenever he first came into the league. So the Bucs are very big on defensive back versatility, right? So I could very well see a lot of formations, a lot of lineups that have McCollum as your cornerback 1, Jacob Parrish is your cornerback 2, which I certainly think he could do a good job at that. And then your nickelback being, Tyke Smith, Antoine Winfield Jr., maybe a rotation of guys, but having a situation like that.
I would say, and just that if I'm Seattle coming into this, you're already thinking about attacking the middle of the field, and you're speaking to, it sounds plausible, but you're also speaking to a little bit of a domino effect where you go, okay, what's been solid slot with Jacob by and large now goes to outside, and outside's been good between the two guys we've had out there. Maybe that goes a little bit backwards, but now we go a little bit backwards at the slot as well. But now we got to grab one of our safeties where now we're going to go a little bit backwards at the safety spot as well, to go a little bit backwards at the slot position as well. Not to mention the Seahawks with Cooper Kupp and JSN and a couple of tight ends have kind of the means to be able to really then attack what then would be ground down to weaker. Maybe you guys just don't have the decision to do a different thing on this because it's driven down by the injuries. And look, you have a 53-man roster and there's only so many moves that can be made. I hate the way the NFL does this. It drives me nuts because that's why I say it's a bridge too far. It's not a team building problem. It's an NFL problem because they're such tightwad bastards with this to where they won't let the rosters expand by 7 or 8 guys to make this easier. But you're kind of maybe I'm not trying to be homerish in how I explain this a bit, but that just does feel a bit like that when you're speaking of that and going down that fashion in line.
That's the problem with injuries, right? Is you do have to make, it's never going to be a good situation, right? Where it's just like, of course, everything will be fine. We're down 2 starters potentially. It'll be fine. It'll all work out. Like, that's never a good situation, right? So I don't think it's a homerish thing, or I don't think it's like a biased or whatever it be to say like, players are hurt. Can we take advantage of this? That's just the nature of the beast, right? That's what happens in sports. So, it is a very legitimate concern, so to speak, where it's like, hey, if you do move pieces around, that's cool. It will help you over here, but now you might have a little bit of more of a hole over here. That's just what happens whenever you have to move around pieces, move around bodies and stuff like that. So, we talked about it earlier about, injuries and also the middle of the field being an issue. If the Buccaneers, are moving so many pieces around to where like, hey, they don't have their traditional 2 starting safeties out there all the time in the backfield because one of them is playing nickel cornerback, can you take advantage of that? That those are the types of conversations that I'm sure the Bucs are going to be having, right? That it's like, okay, how do we mitigate this damage as much as possible to give ourselves the best chance to win? Now, obviously, we're very early on in the week, right? It's only Tuesday right now. We're going to have to wait and see what happens regarding all of those injuries. If we do find out that it's like, hey, Jamel Dean and Benjamin Morrison are good to go, right? That's certainly going to help, right? It certainly cannot be a detrimental thing to have guys healthy and ready to play. But, even Todd Bowles kind of gave off the air of like, man, there's a lot of injuries. Like, this is a lot of injuries whenever he spoke to the media. I believe it was yesterday because, all the MRIs and things and testing that's getting done both yesterday and today as well, Brandon, like, it's just a lot for any team to face. Like you said, it's going to be a difficult situation. So yeah, very curious to see kind of how that injury report shakes out throughout this week and see how available guys really and truly are.
It could make a big difference in this game and be ultimately for 2 teams that are really close. The ultimate thing that pushes it over one to the other, especially for you guys having to travel so far on the road, us having a little bit of a mini bye. These little factors can kind of add up to when it is down that close between 2 teams. Before we do turn over the offense, we'll actually have a couple defensive guys that line I want to ask you about too, just real quick. But watch if you can. This guy was my favorite pure defensive back coming out of the draft that he did. I thought he was awesome. I thought he's one of those lineage guys that you should pay attention to because his father was amazing. And he has really maybe looked really good on this, but how good is Antoine Winfield Jr.?
There are some plays that he makes, Brandon. Like there was a play, it was in week 1 where he was basically in the middle of the back end of the defense, right? And a pass was thrown. It was a deep ball. It was against the Falcons, and basically it was towards the end of the game. Would have probably been a touchdown where it's like, oh, the Bucs might not win this one, right? And Winfield's the nearest defender. He's like 10 yards away. And the snap instinct, I actually did a film review of it on my channel. The snap instinct that he had to not just recognize what was happening on the play, Brandon, but then to have the pure, like insane levels of athleticism to run over 10 yards, hit the wide receiver, to get the pass deflection and stuff like that, is literally only a play that a handful of players in the league can make, in my opinion. And that's the type of dude that he is, where it's like, oh, he just, there's just like a few games every year where it's like, oh yeah, Antoine Winfield Jr. just literally saved us the game. We would have lost the game on this play had Antoine Winfield Jr. not just been insane and just ran over and just did something incredible. He's one of the top paid safeties, defensive backs in the league for a reason, right? He can play both safety spots. He can play nickel back. He is an incredible chess piece, right, for this defense. And the Bucs put a lot of trust in their safeties. I've spoken to a few players in the past where basically in most defenses, and in the Bucs, it's still the case where the inside linebacker has a lot of responsibilities in terms of relaying the plays and whatnot. But in terms of pure communication amongst the defense, the safeties have a lot of responsibility in Todd Bowles' defenses. So just to have such a reliable communicator, such a reliable leader, player, like you said, just an incredibly talented individual in Winfield Jr., it makes the defense flow and be so much more efficient with him than without him, which is what we saw last year whenever he had missed a good chunk of the season due to injury and whatnot. The defense did struggle without him. So yeah, it's certainly not a stretch to say that, like, right now today, I mean, obviously Levante David's still a phenomenal player, but you could very well make the argument that Antoine Winfield Jr. is the second best player on this defense now, behind only maybe Vita Vea, because that dude's just an absolute monster. That's not a crazy thing to say, Brandon, just because of what he offers to this defense. I was shocked that the Bucs got him in round number 2. This was the type of guy where I was like, how in the world did this guy not go in the first round, right? And he was a part of that phenomenal class, same draft as Tristan Wirfs, right? And he really has been exactly as advertised, just one of the top defensive backs in the league, super versatile, super rangy, super athletic. Definitely a guy that you want to see and be like, yeah, play his entire career in Tampa Bay.
I would say that I'd be hastened to guess that there's probably not another safety in this game. Maybe Kyle Hamilton, maybe, that you would take over him, though.
No, I mean, there's really not many safeties that you sit there and think like, okay, this guy is objectively better than Winfield Jr., like, beat for beat, play for play. He's paid like one of the top safeties in the league, and that's because he's probably top 1 to 3 safety in the league. Hands down. I don't think there's much of a question about that.
I don't think so. There is all. He's on a great trajectory, and his dad also a Hall of Famer, hell of a player. And,
oh yeah,
looks like he's able to follow that up. So, best tackling cornerback in NFL history, his father.
Yeah,
fun fact. But I'm sure you already know that, aware of it. Couple just last 2 defense players I want to ask you about, because the pass rush is going to be so important for you guys unless you're going to be blitzing 24/7, which may be an option on the table at this point. You
never know.
The storm's riding. You got to get crazy. Hey, we're down bodies. We got to bring out the theatrics. Hassan Reddick, the book on him passed around a little bit. He's the village bicycle man. Everyone's had a ride. So he's been around, but here's the claim to fame with him. Let me know if this is accurate or not, which is that, especially as he's looking for the contract, became more of the I'm headhunting for sacks. I'll kind of play the run begrudgingly thing. How has he been with the Bucs if he is healthy enough to go?
As far as I've seen, Brandon, he's been I don't want to use the word model citizen because it's not like he's had any off the field issues, but like he's shown up, he's doing his job. He makes some plays in run defense, drops him back into coverage sometimes, which I don't personally, love. I'd rather have him rush the passer as much as possible. It's only like 4 or 5 times a game, but he's been doing fine, all things considered. I think that the expectation for a lot of Bucs fans was, hey, this guy is going to be that, 14 to 17 sack artist for Tampa Bay and is going to, in some people's minds, single-handedly fix the pass rush. And that hasn't necessarily been the case. He's had some fine moments, all things considered, but there's still a lot left to be desired, in my opinion. And like you said, like, he is a guy who does have a little bit of a mercenary vibe. Obviously he was with the Eagles. He then got traded to the Jets and that whole fiasco happened. Now, I do think he's certainly playing better for the Bucs now than what we were seeing with the Jets last year. But they're still kind of waiting for that breakout game from Reddick where it's like, oh, Reddick's completely back. Right. And I feel like once that happens, you will start to see, much like what we talked about earlier, with that pass rush begin to grow and evolve going forward, where it's like, okay, now they can kind of lean a little bit less on the blitz. We just haven't seen that type of game yet from Reddick. He did have, I believe it was a neck stinger against the Eagles or some type of neck injury. I don't believe it is said to be like really serious. But it's one of those things where it's like, look, he's one of those players that needs to step up against Seattle, and Seattle's done a really good job of, retooling and kind of rebuilding their offensive line. Charles Cross at left tackle, Abraham Lucas at right tackle. Like, they really have done a better job in terms of building up this offensive line. So it's not going to be an easy test for Reddick, in my opinion. But it's certainly waiting for him to have that big game, right? And I think a lot of people would want to see it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of horses behind him. The other guy you got on the other side is, I know Logan Hall's out there occasionally, and you do have an all-time Key and P sketch defensive names, by the way, because YaYa Diaby and Levante David, Servassier Dennis. I mean, it's pretty cool. Just the names are just very much like something out of I don't know what. But how has YaYa Diaby developed as well? Because there's so much seemingly kind of on his shoulders too with this to provide some valid edge support out there.
Yeah, YaYa is one of those guys where you take a look at like PFF and you take a look at the advanced metrics in terms of pressures and stuff like that, and it's like, man, this dude is a stud, right? Like, this is great. The biggest issue for YaYa, and he's even expressed his own, frustrations with it, is closing the deal on getting more sacks, right? So far, he has 1 sack this year through 4 games, and the goal is to get more sacks, right? Because to match that, elite PFF numbers or that near elite quarterback pressures and things along those lines is putting it all together and becoming that full end pass rusher, right? YaYa's been a pretty big help in terms of run defense as well. Just freak strong athlete, right? Like, just ridiculously strong type of dude. I think he's probably like the second strongest player on this Bucs defense besides Vita Vea. And the big issue with him is putting it all together. How can the Buccaneers kind of maximize his potential, so to speak, because he has all the tools, Brandon, to be a top tier pass rusher. It is just a matter of closing the deal, finishing the play, getting after the quarterback. And he's trying, man. He's doing a lot of different things in the off seasons to prepare and things like that, and to increase his just second, getting there a second earlier and things along those lines. He's another guy who, is slowly starting to warm up as the season's progressing, much like Reddick. But he's another guy where it's like, hey, definitely need to see more from him going forward.
It's a place where the fans don't tend to have a lot of patience for those guys that are drafted to be earmarked to those pass rushers, and they want a little bit more of, show me something right off the gate. But it's history tells us with these guys, especially guys once you get out of the freakish top 10 range of the first round, that you tend to have to give them the 2 to 3 years, in sort of development to get to that real ripe fruit. It's part of why I think the Falcons were so dumb with that Rams trade and thinking that they're going to add 2 of these pass rushers I know it's kind of somewhat working out for him a little bit, but I wouldn't have given that first round pick up with like the Falcons did to the Rams this last draft because of that very reason that you're very likely not get much from these guys that first year. Did you think they were kind of dumb on that too?
I was surprised. I mean, the Falcons have done a lot of things recently that have been surprising, Brandon. I mean, golly, they have two quarterbacks on their roster right now, and then like you said, they made that big trade up, and like you said, pass rushers do take a little bit more time to grow and develop and things along those lines. It's a weird, it was surprising. I wouldn't have done it, certainly.
I have yet to hear anybody that's even a Falcon fan that said, yeah, that was what we wanted to do on that one. Real good time here as we turn over to the offense to do a quick little ad read. James, my man here, is also you said part of sleeper thing. What's your code, James?
My code is Mr. Bucs.
All right, Mr. Bucs. So, and I can't show you guys my tickets here because it's not showing up right on my side. So that's my bad. But Sleeper's opening up in Washington, October 1st. It's been restricted. It's about to open up here another day or so. So if you want to use my code NEST, N-E-S-T, you can get 100% matched up to $100, or use Mr. BucsNation's code of
Mr. Bucs.
Mr. Bucs. Either of those two codes, use that code, get 100% matched up to $100. Get your tickets, get your picks in today. You can get a daily fantasy. You can get in the overs and unders on Sunday. You can get in the live action. Even after games have started, you can still bounce in there at that point. I put a ticket together right now. I can't quite share it because it's not working on my screen, but a ticket put together right now of Higbee over 18.5 yards, Devontae Adams over 56.5 yards, Kyron Williams with more than 40 rushing yards, and Byron Robinson with more than 16.5 rushing yards. You like those picks, James?
I do. It all sounds pretty solid to me.
Thursday night games. We got $5 down on that. You can win yourself $35 on that. They've got a bunch of little bonus things that they put in there throughout on this side of it. Please see Sleeper's terms and conditions. But thank you for sponsoring the channel as they are, and sponsoring Mr. BucsNation as well. Just another note as well here is that I lost my background. Another note here as well for if you can click down that description section below here. There's a link directly to James's channel here, Mr. BucsNation. You can click on that link, goes right to his channel, sub on up. It's free to you, and you show him some love for taking time out of his day to come in here, as I know he is running around hot like myself on this one. All right, let's get over to the offensive side of the ball here, James, as we talked a little bit about this, but the first place I want to begin with is that it felt like to me a lot of what's happened here with Evans out of the lineup, especially, and maybe not as much speed, let's say, on the outside, because Emeka Egbuka, I love. He's going to be fantastic. He is. I do think he's going to be a slot when it's really all said and done. I think you make dub at the outside here and there, and that you can get condensed splits like we're doing with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you can get around a little bit of that. But there does feel a little bit, watching last week with Godwin and him both out on the football field, to me at times, like there was a lot of compression by the Eagles. And that led to at times having the 60, 70-yard pass to Bucky Irvin over the top, where you could take the top of the defense off because things were getting compressed. But it did feel like they weren't as scared or fearful about being attacked on the back end in a way that you wouldn't if Mike Evans was out there and healthy. And that there's a little bit of, from the Bucs standpoint, of having to get more now east and west at times, offensively speaking, more than attacking as much vertically. You shoot some holes in this stuff, and what I'm saying, by all means, go ahead. It's just generally kind of the outside looking in. So is any of that accurate, or is it off the mark?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously when you're missing a guy like Evans, that's a vertical threat. I know people don't think of Evans as a more vertical threat because you typically think of like your Tyreek Hills and your speed guys and stuff like that. But like, no, Evans is certainly a vertical threat in this offense. Now with Godwin and Egbuka, what's so interesting, and you alluded to it, is that they're very similar players, right? Where they exceed the most in the slot. Certainly both can play on the outside if necessary, but that is where they succeed, is more so in the slot. And I agree with you, man. Egbuka, look, and I've been very adamant about this. Would I have picked Emeka Egbuka in the draft? No, but that's not because of the player of Egbuka, right? I think Egbuka is a fantastic player, and obviously with the injuries the Bucs have had at wide receiver, he is certainly helping. Now, you couldn't have predicted that was going to happen, but I personally believed that the Buccaneers needed more help at inside linebacker, possibly even edge rusher as well. They went wide receiver. Now, again, with Godwin and Ibuka being in this fold, you are going to have some very interesting rotations in there where sometimes Godwin's in the slot, sometimes Ibuka's in the slot, sometimes Sterling Shepard is in the slot. Their current third receiver with Evans being out, and then you're going to have, Ibuka and Godwin on the outside. So it does create some interesting scenarios offensively that could have success, but also you do kind of run into that issue where you do have a little bit too much of the same thing going on in terms of your player type, so to speak, in terms of like, hey, we've got a little bit too many slot guys right now. And that's kind of the issue with missing Evans, right? And it's been something that they haven't really yet been able to replicate offensively, where it's like, hey, getting another guy that can, of course, you can't, replicate what Evans does for you fully, but having some type of outside perimeter wide receiver that is a bit more of a deep threat type of guy is something that they have yet to fully find. They are kind of trying to have Ibuka and Godwin fill in those roles in some opportunities to, some levels of success, right? Like you said, the Bucky Irving 77-yard touchdown. Ibuka had like a 70-yard touchdown in the game as well. So they are having some levels of success with that. But like you said, consistency is something that is escaping this offense a little bit more. Part of that is also because of the injuries to the offensive line also.
Yeah, that part can't be understated. Is offensive line injuries, shorter passing game, less separation. But this is a little bit something you can kind of count on too, because the offensive line, as we'll talk about in a second, is going to still remain a little bit in a problematic state walking into this game because of the injuries. But to your point on this, was watching the tape last night and I went, oof, Godwin's not getting a lot of separation here. Sometimes on some of these routes, I'm not seeing a lot of separation from Ibuka. When check the stats on NFL.com with this, 29th in the NFL right now are the receivers in average separation on route. So it is kind of add up a little bit as far as the numbers to that, just a tiny little bit on top of that, and something that is maybe something to watch for in this game on how your Bucs counter that. And if they can find some of those, maybe deeper shots down the field like they did in this game, because we've done a good job of keeping the chunk plays under wraps too, defensively, where we play a lot of guys in the coverage. We just run the front four. We're not stacking the box a lot. We're going to make you be patient with it. So be kind of interesting on that chess match, how that'll go.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to say this too, like the Seahawks, obviously with their head coach being a defensive minded guy and Mac McDonald, I mean, you have a lot of really good pieces there. Devon Witherspoon is such an underrated cornerback in my mind. Like, I think that dude is just a stud. And then you've also got some other guys like Tariq Woolen is in there. You've got, again, Josh Jobe is in there, Julian Love at safety, Kobe Bryant back there at safety, and their pass rush, look, is certainly a retooled pass rush, I think is the best way to put it. Like Jerron Reed is there, Byron Murphy II, Leonard Williams is still an absolute beast. DeMarcus Lawrence is out there as well. Like this is a Seahawks defense where, look, they put a lot of time and effort in precision into building that specific type of defense, right? That is, going to get after it with their front, with a four-man rush. They have the defensive backs to really, get covered sacks and things along those lines. And like you said, it can cause some headaches for certain offenses for sure. So the Bucs need to find a way to counter that. If it's schematically creating guys to get into space, if it's working screen games, whatever it may be, the Bucs are going to have a bit of a tricky trial here to get after it. What is, in my opinion, a pretty stingy, a pretty stubborn Seahawks defense.
Yeah, I think you accurately captured it. I think the thing that stands out to me is you're 31st as a defense Seahawks right now in blitzing. Yet you find yourself, I think, top 5 in pressure rate in the NFL. So your front four is generating the pressure without needing to have the extra bodies up there in order to do so. And then that's accommodating you an ability to drop so many guys in coverage. That's part of the reason that we've gotten so many turnovers and interceptions, because you're really squeezing down some of these passing windows out there on these quarterbacks with so many bodies back into that secondary. And it's a good way to operate defensively. You can get away with doing it, but those guys don't get pressure as well. You can have 11 a quarterback have 8 years and a day to stand back there and throw. And I will say as well, because there's an onus on our defense to kind of protect against that deep ball, and that we really have removed the deep shot almost completely from offenses against us so far this year, that then does open up a bit of that door. Rachaad White, who is a very good pass catcher out of the backfield, maybe better pass catcher out of the backfield than actually a runner of the rock, purely from behind center, and that's a guy that I'm expecting. He's going to come out of this game with probably easily 6, 7, 8 catches in this game. And by the purpose of the approach, I think, of Tampa Bay trying to attack what has been a little bit of our weakness on this defense. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, you had the Baltimore Raven, Kansas City Chiefs playoff game and the conference championship. Chiefs get those 2 early scores, and what are they doing? Just working bubble screens, throwing little pop passes in space, throws to the flat, not really trying to work much down the field, understanding McDonald's defense wasn't going to allow that. And I would expect your Buccaneers on the road, try to control the clock, try to just kind of piecemeal their way up the field with on the back of that a little bit.
Yeah, that's something I could certainly see. And we've actually seen guys like Godwin and even Ibuka a little bit have success in screen games. For Ibuka this year, for Godwin throughout his career has had some really good success in terms of, bubble screens and stuff like that in his career, as a receiver. So I could certainly see that being a thing. Even with, the short game and stuff like that. Rachaad White, who honestly, Brandon, I've been pretty impressed with Rachaad White this year. Not just as a receiver, but also as a runner. I just feel like he's been running with a lot of power this year and has really been fighting for a lot of tough yardage for the Bucs. So I do agree with you. I think that those are some opportunities where the Buccaneers could take advantage of it. One guy who may step up is Cade Otton, who we haven't seen a ton of this year. I think he's only been targeted 6 or 7 times through 4 games, mainly because he's been helping block. But he may be another guy as well when you're talking about those flat routes, when you're talking about opportunities like that. He may be a guy that could get some opportunities in there as well. Of course, Bucky Irving, could catch the occasional screen, and he is such a dynamic running back as well. Out of the backfield and whatnot. He's coming off of a game where he just had 180 scrimmage yards against the Eagles. So he is another piece that could very well be an option in there also.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch Irving be a guy little bit of a later drafted guy. People worried a little bit about the size. Does he have enough speed? Just a tackle breaker, great contact balance, keeps his feet, just extends runs. Been a very good pro versus. It's a tough evaluation in college too. You liked him as a player, but there are those players you watch in college. You go, well, he's just big enough for college and just fast enough for college. I bring him to the pro area, and then Cam Scatabo was a little bit like this for me too for the Giants with him coming out of the last draft too, where you go, like him a lot as a player, but there are those players that top out sometimes, as they get to that next level and they find themselves just a little short. But he's been wonderful for you guys, and that was he was impressive last week.
Yeah, Bucky, he's been fantastic for the Bucs. Even last year, this year, he's really done a fantastic job of, just being a great pure runner, a great just all-around option for the Bucs. Now, I will say, like, the one thing where, very thankful to have Rachaad White is in terms of like his pass blocking on whenever blitzes do happen, as well as more of a versatile receiving option. I would probably give that more so to Rachaad White than to Bucky Irving. But, Bucky Irving, like we saw last week, can make the occasional really big play as a receiving back as well. So it's a pretty good combo, 1-2 combo, in my opinion, for the Bucs offensively in terms of that running back room.
It's the new NFL too. It's not about having the bell cow anymore. It is really about a 1-2 punch in most places across the league, because 17 games, it's just nobody's going 350 touches anymore. Just not happening. And if you do, you're probably getting that guy broken for the next year if you do get it throwing him that much.
Right.
The offensive line. All right, we got now I keep saying Goedeke, but you were probably pronouncing it correctly. How do I gotta be pronouncing this?
Luke Goedeke.
Goedeke.
Yep.
Okay, so we got Luke Goedeke. He's out. Cody Mock also out.
Mm-hmm.
So is this a weak point on the line, or is it just we're not quite the strength we were?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't say as far as it being like a detrimental weak point. Because one thing that I was very happy to see is that with Tristan Wirfs coming back this past week, the offensive line looked dramatically better. I mean, dramatically better. And that's against a pretty good Philadelphia Eagles front as well. Before Wirfs came back, you had guys playing out of position. You had practice squad elevations and promotions coming in. It was a bit of a mess, right? With Wirfs now back in the mix, you do have, guys playing back in their original spots. Ben Bredesen at left guard, Graham Barton at center. Right guard and right tackle, you are down to your backups, right? And that's not an ideal situation, but it's certainly a whole heck of a lot better with Wirfs being in that lineup versus him not being in that lineup. So I do got to say it isn't a full weak point, so to speak. I mean, you can certainly attack and get after that right side of the offensive line. But this is about the best the O-line has looked since the whole season, to be blunt.
And it's Heck at right tackle for you?
It is Charlie Heck at right tackle, and at right guard, it's probably going to be Luke Haggard, an elevation from the practice squad.
Fun fact for you, Andy Heck, his father, was a first-round pick tackle selection for our Seahawks. And I don't know if you know this fun fact, Derek Thomas's 7-sack game came on the back of Andy Heck.
That's rough. Not great. Not great familial lineage there for Charlie Heck, huh?
No, not the greatest of standard on that one. So, hey, at least he set a low floor for you to climb past. It's easy to overcome that one. So he was a little bit of a disappointment for us back in the day. Andy is a number one pick for us. But yeah, that was a tough game too, man. We won the game though. How about that? Won the game like a Hail Mary. So
giving up 7 sacks to one player and still winning the game is phenomenal.
It's pretty wild, especially because there was other sacks on that day in addition to that. It wasn't just Derek, everybody's getting a little bit of a slice of pie that day.
Oh yeah.
With talking a little bit, and it's not surprising with Tristan Wirfs, it's amazing how a good left tackle can settle everything down on an offensive line. It's kind of wild to watch. Seeing that a couple of guys got to go back to their original places, and you do have in Bredesen and I know Barton is a player I loved a lot coming out of, I think it was Duke a couple years ago. Solid player. You knew he was going to be pretty good right from the jump. So this brings us to really Baker and where he's at in this game, in that running game maybe a little weakened if Irvin's not in there. Offensive line a little bit weakened in this. My outlook on how to play Baker is that he's legitimate to me. He's got to that place that these quarterbacks get to in development where I think with his talent meshing together, still a young enough player that he's not lost the physical tools that got him there. Is that if I'm a defense on this, I want to keep him in the pocket and keep him playing on time. He can do that stuff well. He's not completely bad at that. But I feel like I have him at his most dangerous as I watch him that second half and watch him play throughout his career. When he gets loose and I allow him to break a pocket, I only look down the field where that's where he starts to kind of get you troublish. If you can force him for a whole game to kind of stay between those tackle boxes, to try to stay within the pocket, that you can get a little bit of a lesser effective Baker in that way. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, just for what Baker's been this season, Brandon, he's been a stud. I mean, no question about it. He is the lifeblood of the Bucs right now. I mean, their first 3 games, they get fourth quarter comeback wins, and it was mixed circumstances and things along those lines that caused those comebacks to be won. But I mean, he almost did it against the defending Super Bowl champions, So this is a guy who just has been getting after it this year, and has really been looking, just like a top quarterback in the league, I think. Now I agree with you. Where Baker, I think, is at his best is when he's able to break out of the pocket, get the occasional scramble. That's been something that's been really underrated with Mayfield's game this year, is his scrambling ability in crucial moments. If it is a need to get it third down or a need to get it fourth down, there have been times this year where Baker's the one calling his number and breaking out of the pocket, breaking away from the pressure, and getting those incredibly crucial, needed game-winning first downs. That's where he's at his best, where the play is breaking down. He can extend the play with his legs. He can get after it, and eventually find the open guy, be it downfield, be it a short dump off, be it with his legs, whatever it may be. I agree with you, where keeping him contained is kind of your best bet against Baker, where if he doesn't really have any running lanes, or if he doesn't have the ability to express that pocket mobility and that just pocket awareness, I guess. If you're collapsing that pocket around him consistently, that is a pretty good way to get after Mayfield, right? Because when he does break out of that pocket, whenever he does, really have that high-end situational awareness in the pocket and stuff like that, that's certainly when he's at his most dangerous, in my opinion. So I do agree with your point there of that being the best way to attack Baker, is to keep him one-dimensional. Absolutely.
Can't stop him fully. I think I've been a big believer in seeing what he's done there. And I tell you, my evaluations of quarterback is changing through these recent years, as I think that so much of the doors opened up to, and you can attest this, your fan base before Baker came there, of you just go draft one, just go draft this guy, just go grab the next magical son. It's like, well, sometimes you can be a little creative in your outlook of this because there's market opportunities out there for these kind of quarterbacks, be it a Baker Mayfield or a Sam Darnold, who've advanced their game, who've done what I call the lonely work, in the midnight hour, burning that oil just with a lamp light, I picture, and watching tape and grinding through tape and getting answers and grinding on their work habits physically and just bettering themselves. And you do that for 5-6 years straight, and you have that commitment to it, the love of the game in that way, that you will eventually get to the fruits of that bearing out. And especially when you're a talented player like Sam and Baker, who originally were, top 5 guys, number 1 overall pick, number 3 overall pick, they have the physical goods.
I want to say too, and for the Bucs, before Baker, in between Jameis, as well, we don't need to draft another guy. We're just going to go sign Tom Brady, I guess, So that was kind of but I do agree with you where you've even seen this. You've seen this twice, Brandon, with Geno. Where move on from Russell Wilson. Everyone thought, okay, they're going to tank with Geno. They're going to draft a quarterback in this draft. I don't remember what draft that was, but if it's like a Fields or a Caleb Williams or whatever it was during those couple years, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, Geno's like actually a very competent starter in this league. So you've seen those career revivals twice, and we're seeing it more and more around the league. Jared Goff with the Lions is another really good example, where these guys who may have been cast off or were cast off by their original teams are getting to their next, and it may take 2-3 tries for some of them, but you're seeing these career revivals, right? And it is a very cool, encouraging thing to see. It does kind of make you change up how you view quarterback situations, and guys that you may have written off in the past, you're all of a sudden thinking like, well, there is a starting opportunity over here. How can this guy do? It's much like what you said earlier with like pass rushers. It's these quarterbacks might not tap into their potentials until they're 28, 29, 30 years old. But then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this guy's a very legitimate, very viable starter in this league. It's just all about getting into the right situation. And we've seen such a revolution with that as well, I think. Not to get on like a long tangent, but
no, I love that. I think this is it's such an important discussion. And quarterback, even when you've got one like Baker, it's always a constant discussion. And to me, I'd like to hear what you think on this, and that I think that this is maybe where the game's transitioning to because of going back to kind of traditional stuff.
Scheme matters. Yeah. Scheme and coaching matters so much in quarterback development. And we're seeing such a real like revolution of like West Coast style offenses. It kind of become the norm where these offenses and you're seeing guys from, the Mike Shanahan tree, the Sean McVay tree, go to these places and get these head coaching opportunities, and they're building these offenses where it's like, hey, we're not going to make this hard on the quarterback. We are going to have the quarterback take what defenses are giving them, is kind of like that big, MO, so to speak. Right. And you know what, Brandon, it's working, it's working around the league and that's kind of where you're finding a lot of these revivals, where that's like the initial thing that gets these quarterbacks back on track. And then it turns into that conversation of, okay, your confidence is built back up. You've gotten into this groove now. Now let's start showcasing more of that raw natural talent that you have. And it really is just, it's a fun, cool thing to see, right? Because obviously these guys are, if the conversation is always like draft a guy, it's like Sam Darnold was a former number 3 overall pick. Baker Mayfield was a former number 1 overall pick, These guys were drafted at a high level. Obviously that is for a reason, because these guys still have potential. And I love seeing these teams, acquire these guys and tap into that latent potential and get their careers going again, man. It's awesome to see.
Well, you mentioned the West Coast offense, and that's what I think is driving this a bit too, is that you have to get into the right plays to attack those numbers. I come up with a play as a quarterback, but I've got maybe 3 plays in your head, and you're smart enough to be able to understand that. And, hey, I got numbers to the side, change to that play to that side after I'm off the mic with you in the helmet. And what we saw in the 2000 teens with guys like Robert Griffin or Colin Kaepernick coming in, there was a draw to go to spread, and spread started to take over as we got through the late teens. And what we're seeing now is that rotation back into West Coast under center stuff, footwork stuff, 7-step, 5-step drop stuff with the hitch, little bit stuff that's more advanced. Cause that was the nice thing with those quarterbacks in the spread is I could take Robert Griffin from Baylor. And that was a Shanahan offense he went to in Washington, but remember they changed that offense to a Baylor-like offense mid-season or right on the fly. Basically, he's going in there. And I think that that's what allowed you to have these teams be able to go grab a quarterback, get instantaneous production from him, and they could kind of hit the ground running. I wonder if right now where we're at with the NFL and where you are on this, if not, maybe we're in ground right now to where that can't happen as much if you got to go back to these sort of a traditional offense. You got to be back under center, that there's going to be more checks to the line. There's going to be more on the quarterback's shoulders on mentally, I guess, as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think that is certainly possible. I would love to see because you did have those moments, right, with Shanahan and Griffin where it's like, oh, immediate success. Andrew Luck had, similar type of thing too. But for all of those, first year successes, there was like 12 failures, because it was way too much pressure. It was way too much, way too quickly for these guys. I mean, we've seen that in all the examples that, for Baker, for Darnold, for some of these other guys where they started off their career had way too much in terms of offensive responsibility, let's say, thrown at them. I think that hey, taking a more patient approach where if you are going to draft a quarterback or have that type of situation, ease them into it, and I know that in the modern NFL, you see so much impatience, right? We talked about it earlier, but I mean, to have long-term sustainable success, you're never going to get anywhere if you draft a guy. And we almost saw this a little bit with Caleb Williams. I feel like they are kind of maybe starting to turn a little bit of a corner now with, Ben Johnson, but you saw so much of it where it was like, hey, we drafted you even if it's a number 1 or number 3 overall guy, right? It's like, hey, we drafted you, save us, and it's like 100%. that to me is just completely an unreliable way to rely on things. You cannot draft a guy number 1 overall or number 3 overall in the case of Darnold and Baker and all of a sudden say, okay, yeah, we're ready to be, a top offense now. And this guy is ready to just be the flat out straight up franchise quarterback. It's like, nah, man, he doesn't even, he hasn't even adapted to NFL speed yet, and an NFL playbook. We need to ease these guys more into it. And I agree with you. I feel like we are seeing, we saw so much of that spread stuff. And even recently with Mahomes, right? Obviously he just blew up, but even he had a couple years to develop in that system behind Alex Smith before he could really blow up in that more spread type of Chiefs offense as well. So it just depends on giving guys time. If you throw too much at them too quickly, you're gonna run into issues unless the dude is absolutely just insanely generational, just the way it is. You've even seen that with generational guys like Trevor Lawrence, where everybody was like, this is the best prospect since Peyton Manning. It's like, well, you throw too much at a guy too quickly, there's going to be issues. So I am all for this rebound in this turning back to, hey, we're going to make more quarterback friendly offenses. And you're seeing, I want to say a little bit less than half the teams in the league. Maybe it is around half the teams in the league kind of develop more of this quarterback friendly offenses now going forward. I think that's the way to do it, just because you let a guy build up confidence in that initial stages of him being with the team. And then it's a scenario where it's like, okay, now let's open up the playbook a little bit more. Now let's kind of take those shots further with this offense and rely more on, hey, one of the reasons we did draft you, that's because, hey, you're a freak athlete. You've got freakish arm talent. Well, let's open up that playbook a little bit. And you see that with Darnold. You see that with Baker now, your Geno Smiths, your Jared Goffs, stuff like that, where it is scenarios like that, I believe.
Yeah, good points on that all around. And you're pointed to about the savior aspect. That's the other part. You're talking about a little bit playbook and advancement of where they are with that and what they can have on their plate. But what else about, hey, come save us. Hey, We have horrible coaching. We can't hire the right head coach. Hey, we can't draft worth a damn and we don't know how to spend any money. And then you got to come in and be that guy with the cape on your back. And you mentioned Chicago with Caleb. They're on their third guy in the last 13 years they've done this with. Mitchell Trubisky and then Justin Fields. And Justin Fields wasn't part of the plan. It was, oh, he dipped down to here. Let's just go get him. Are we in the right place organizationally? Doesn't matter. Do we have the right coach? Doesn't matter. Do we have a plan for developing? Doesn't matter. It's like, well, it does matter. You got to take it all into account. And to me, as we get the bottom line on this, if I'm going for a quarterback, be it into next year, 2 years down the line at this stage, we're at in the NFL, I'm going market opportunity for a guy I could go find somewhere in the market. Some guy that has been, rather than trying to do this, let me package multitude of picks up into a first round. Let me sacrifice future draft capital to go up in this first round for this guy. It's probably going to take a couple of years to develop in this modern offensive paradigm we find ourselves within.
Yeah, I think in that's another thing that I've been like super curious about the past couple of years has been like the availability of veterans that are like, oh, this guy could just very reasonably be a starter for you, like your Sam Darnolds, like your Baker Mayfields, where it's like, hey, these guys were cast off. Give them a chance. And hey, if it does work out, you just found your next guy, your guy for the next 5+ years, potentially. If it doesn't work out, well, you're going to have a high draft pick anyway, and you don't have to trade up to make that type of decision, right? So, like, I'm lately the past couple of off seasons, not including Brady, right, but more so in recent memory, I've always been a guy that's been like, yeah, go get the veteran, go get the guy who, may be the right system and right offensive coach away from really being somebody. Versus, like you said, with the impatience of the modern NFL, okay, go trade up a gigantic package of picks to go get your guy, or what you deem as your guy.
It all comes down to team, man. You had a team in Tampa Bay that had Jameis Winston there, leads the league in interceptions, but you obviously had this just tremendous team around him. And you go get Tom Brady, and look, Tom Brady was really good at the end still and still was a baller down the line. But he was also a guy with the Patriots that didn't have that supporting cast that final year before he came to Tampa Bay. And I don't think they even got to the playoffs. So it's not that he regained his skills back with Tampa Bay. And indeed, that was the COVID year. So he didn't even have really the offseason to get as in deep dive as you could on that team to take over. But it just goes to show you that the team building concept is ultimately what should win the day. The quarterback is an important piece on that. But I think Brady and Mahomes have kind of broken people's brain on this because we've had two GOATs roll through back to back over the last 15 years. So everybody thinks you got to have a GOAT now to make it happen. But we got to a Super Bowl with Russell not in GOAT status at that time. He got better as a player. He was a good initially, and he became a guy who was like an MVP-like player in the late teens. But 2013, went to Super Bowl 2014, he was a more of top 10, top 8-ish maybe quarterback in the sport. And you can get there with that too. There are multiple roads to getting that Super Bowl championship. It doesn't just have to be with a GOAT.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Bucs won a Super Bowl with Brad Johnson at quarterback.
Amen. See, hey, there we go.
I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to automatically have a top tier quarterback on your team, like right away. Like guys can grow into that. Guys can develop into that. And right now, like Sam, Baker, those are guys who I would say they're absolute minimum top half quarterbacks in this league, and that is certainly serviceable and good enough to get you into playoff runs and deep playoff runs at that.
We just had Jalen Hurts win the Super Bowl. I don't think I hope you're not on that bandwagon of he's a top 5 quarterback, are you?
Not quite, no.
Yeah. So I just, more proof of the pudding, and it just happened in, recency bias. Or, that was 10 years ago that happened. Yeah, it's a new game now. Well, is it? Maybe it still is the rule proven true on this. And one thing is for sure, I don't know if you guys are going to get back to health, but I will say this with you walking into it, James, I thought you guys had as much of a chance in a pretty open NFC with the type of roster you'd put together. Health holding up. You need Mike Evans to me to hold up to get your guys' top open end. But I think you guys got as much ability as anybody if you can find a way to round in his shape. Ultimately we'll see because you might have a couple injuries you're not coming back from, but you still have a really good roster out there, James.
Yeah, and I love this matchup also just for 2 reasons. One, like these are 2 very similar teams, right? Where it's like, teams that have built themselves up well through good roster construction and things along those lines. Also, just these were the 2 teams that entered the league together in '76, which is just such a fun historical thing for me. It's both of our teams' 50th anniversary here, Brandon. Very exciting times.
Very exciting. And we're going to have an all-time jersey game this upcoming Sunday. So we got two of the best throwbacks that are out there in the business, and it's going to look tight on the field. So I'm really looking forward to a matchup on this one. Thank you for today coming in here and taking the time like you have. Let's get a score prediction. I want to feel the confidence of James and where it's at.
I do think this is going to be a close game. Also, shout out to the Seahawks, by the way, for winning last week. Absolutely crazy end to the game against Arizona. That was wild. I do think the Bucs, I will give them a win in this. I feel like the ending to that Philadelphia Eagles game was just so heartbreaking, in my opinion, that they certainly want to get their win back, so to speak, and just continue to be in the lead for that NFC South race. So I will give them the win here. I do think it's going to be a pretty close game. I'm going to say 24-21 in favor of the Bucs here.
I like it. Nice and close. I'd expect it to be a fairly close game as well. As this all breaks down, like you say, they're almost kind of two mirrors of each other at times, the way these rosters are sort of set up, being complete rosters and hard to get out of pace from either of them, as the Eagles learned last week with them mounting that furious comeback and almost able to nip them there at the end. Well, do me this favor, folks, if you can. The show is sponsored by Sleeper app. You can get the Sleeper app today, and they will match you 100% of your deposit up to $100. That's $100 from me to you, and you support the show at the same time. And people may be saying, well, the app's not here in Seattle. It's opening up on October 1st in the state of Washington, I'm being told. So you're going to be able to use this app, get $100 in your pocket by supporting the channel at the same time. The other thing I'd like you to do is please do click the link down in the description section below, which is a link directly to James's channel, which is Mr. BucsNation. Click on that link, go over there, sub up to him. I'm sure we're going to be maybe potentially back around here into the playoffs, James, on this one. You never know with these two teams. So we might have you back around in these parts again down the line, but please do show him some love for taking so much of his time out of his day, as I know he is hustling. He's got a roundtable show like me tonight. So appreciate you taking the time out as you have today, James.
Of course, Brandon. Thank you for having me on, man. Like you said, both these teams are teams vying for playoff spots, both in really good spots right now in terms of their record and stuff. So could very well have to do another one of these come January. So
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it.
We'd both be feeling good about that. Yeah.
You know it. We ain't greedy out here. I just give you a playoff berth. I'm a happy camper. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
A couple of people just want to give a thank you to Ola Greasy. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member here. Really appreciate you for that. Devo Marcel, thank you for becoming a member as well. I know you've been a member before. Thank you for re-upping over on my side of it. Really, really appreciate you. Folks, if you can, hit that like button. Sub on up over here if you haven't on the side as well. I'd really appreciate it. James, you are the man for taking the time out today. Please do sub up over on his side. Use that code on Sleeper, NEST. Get that match on $100 deposit. We will be back here shortly with a roundtable on his side and my side on that end of it. But until next time, please, folks, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks. Get it? Throw me Go Bucs.
Go Bucs.
There we go.